So if you remember, on Easter, I spoke about water softeners and the process by which water is transformed from a molecule containing, say, magnesium and iron into a molecule which does not. And I spoke about my trepidation as a water molecule, having only known myself with magnesium and iron, approaching a water softener and wondering what was going to happen to me on the other side. And I did not suggest, I didn't come up with a way of, I didn't try to come up with a way of talking about how I could be willing to go through the water softener. And in a way, that's what I'm talking about today, but take the long and complex route. I'm going to have to extemporize some because this is way too long and complex. But the crux of what I'm trying to say is that let's say you come into the world as a drop of rain, you're H2O, you find yourself, as rain does, percolating down through the soil, where you pick up some magnesium and iron that just accrue to you because it's the soil, also some sulfur if you happen to be my water. But you accrue these things, and then you get collected into a well, you get sucked up into the pipes, and you head towards the water softener. And more or less the task of our human life, in a way, is at some point to look at the molecular level of our life and say, these parts are accruals. These parts have come to cling to me. And this is my real and authentic self. Without this stuff. And a bunch of this stuff over here, the accruals, the magnesium and sulfur and iron, is stuff that happens to us because of the way we're raised and the environments we face and the way the world is at the time that we enter it. And we respond to those things and we develop defenses and we defend ourselves from our brothers and sisters, and we defend ourselves from World War II, and we defend ourselves from the politics of our time. We defend ourselves from the schoolyard bullies, and maybe one of the ways that we defend ourselves from the schoolyard bullies is to play really dumb all the time. And then at some point in our lives, we have to realize we're not dumb. That's a defense that we developed so that we didn't get beat up in the schoolyard. And so that's where we decided we've got to figure out the difference between the stuff that clung to us because of our circumstances, because of our environment, and the stuff that's really authentically us, the genuine H2O. When you record people, audio recordings, as I've done sometimes when I've asked people to speak about faith, so that other people could hear them, you generally discover that there is a lot more going on in your environment than you are ever aware of. Particularly refrigerators, furnaces, air conditioning, conversations in the next room, and people playing the radio down the block. And ordinarily, we don't pay attention to these things, but the tape recorder or the whatever you're using to recorder, your digital recorder, it doesn't distinguish. And you wind up with somebody talking, and if you're in a quiet room and all you have to do is concentrate on their voice, you can still make out what they're saying. But in the environment in which we tend to listen to audio, which is, say, driving in your car or listening as you're washing the dishes, you can't make it out. And so they've developed software that helps you take away this unwanted noise, the air conditioning, the hum of the fluorescent lights, the furnace turning on and off, the refrigerator. And so, because I would make these recordings, I had to learn how to use this software. And as I was first learning how to use it, it can be really cool because you kind of focus in on the noise and then you turn a dial and take away the noise. And it's really cool until you discover that you somehow made a mild-mannered, gentle 80-year-old man sound like Darth Vader. And then it's not cool anymore because Charlie Pearson doesn't deserve to sound like Darth Vader. That's not in his personality. But if you take away all the noise of his environment, you take away some of his upper frequencies, and before you know it, you have Darth Vader. And so this is kind of like the process that we go through in trying to figure out how much of this accrual can we slice off or soften out or whatever, and how much of it is actually ours, essential to us, that we need for our voice to be our voice. So in the Gospel of John, in the 17th chapter, there's a very interesting and perplexing long prayer by Jesus as he is preparing for death. And he is praying to God that the disciples will be able to carry on his work. And so in his prayer, what he is saying is, obviously, Peter is not me, but there is something of me in Peter that will allow Peter to make his way in the world in such a way that I will be present in the world because of my presence in Peter. It goes back and forth about who is present in whom. Is God going to be present in the disciples? Are the disciples present in God? And I will read it so you can see the complexity. So this is Jesus talking to God. I ask not only on behalf of these, but also on behalf of those who will believe in me through their word, that they may all be one. As you, Father, are in me and I am in you, may they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. The glory that you have given me, I have given them, so that they may be one as we are one. I in them and you and me, that they may become completely one, so that the world may know that you have sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me. Father, I desire that those also whom you have given me may be with me where I am to see my glory, which you have given me because you loved me before the foundation of the world. Righteous Father, the world does not know you, but I know you, and these know that you have sent me. I made your name known to them, and I will make it known, so that the love with which you have loved me may be in them, and I in them. I think if I were to translate that into just a few sentences to try to clarify it for myself, I would put it like this. Dear Father, you are in me, and I am in you, and may these, my friends, also be in us. May they be in us so that they may be one, just as you and I are one. Since I am in them and you are in me, may they become completely one with us and with each other. May the love that you have for me be in them. May I myself be in them. And may this be obvious in the unity they have with one another. And it seems all very abstract until we find that Paul uses more or less this argument in some of his letters, in particular his first letter to the Corinthians, because he's trying to tell people, yeah, I know I wasn't there with Jesus, and you've met these other guys who were there Jesus like Peter and John and those guys, but I still have it in me too, because Jesus came and gave it to me. And just the same way that Peter received the teaching of Jesus from Jesus' mouth, I received the teaching of Jesus through Christ in my heart. So you can believe me just as much as you believe Peter. Although Paul being Paul and not necessarily always the humblest guy in the world, make sure to say, I worked even harder than they did. So not only do we have the same message, but I worked harder. But you can believe me because it's the same message. And I think it's that human part about we have the same message, but I worked harder. That points to the kind of twofold spiritual work that is ours to do for our entire lives. And that is, on the one hand, to listen within our hearts where the inward Christ resides for how we are being directed, but also to examine ourselves for what parts of us need to be removed from us through the water purifier. And I kind of think that if you were to kind of divide up this work chronologically, we would spend, say, the early parts of our lives, if we're lucky, and if we're not lucky, all our lives. But if we are lucky and we have good parenting and bombs are not being dropped on us and we're not being starved to death, we'll spend the early parts of our lives figuring out what our gifts are, what God has given us to give away to others. And then as we become adults and we've gone through our share of schoolyard bullies and indoctrination processes and bad bosses and good bosses and all those things, then we'll spend the next parts of our lives trying to figure out what's authentically me and what's the part that I need to shed. What's the part that I need to be transformed away from? What is, because it is now an obstacle to me in the expression of my gifts. So the early Christian writers liked to talk about our life of faith. They like to make the analogy between our life of faith and a boat. Our life is like a ship, and we're the captain. All of our skill and energy and attention are necessary to avoid shipwreck and arrive in port, for the ocean is dangerous and inattention is disastrous. Our ship, however, also needs the wind. It is the wind that fills the sails and moves the ship, and when the two are weighed against each other, the skill of the captain seems very small compared with the contribution of the wind. And yet, the boat does not move without both of those things. So we go back to the analogy of removing noise. Our lives make huge quantities of noise. Our responsibilities, our errands, the people that we love, the people that we do not love, our enemies as well as our friends, the news, the gossip, all the commitments that we've made. And it's always our task to be looking at that noise and figuring out what parts of this noise are extraneous to my voice. What parts of this noise prevent me from expressing who God is calling me to be? And which parts of these noise are my voice and necessary for me to give away what God has given me to give away? I think that's a question that is never answered once and for all. If we go back to our examination of spiritual disciplines, it's one of the points of the spiritual disciplines, probably particularly meditation and silence, to allow us to figure out all this noise, what's necessary, what's essential to my voice, and what parts of it could I set to the side? What could I say no to? What could I say isn't necessary? Every day, maybe, or at least once a week, or when we can, to ask ourselves, what part of the noise surrounding my voice should I be wanting to remove?